Hey guys, it's a steaming pile of ship here, and in today's video we'll be taking a look at the Enterprise. It's the new Tier 8 premium carrier for the US Navy. I have to say I almost didn't record this match. You could see that I was kind of looking at the team roster, kind of getting a glimpse of what I was up against. And when I saw that there were Tier 10s in the game, and even the Tier 8s in the game had fairly good AA, I really was not looking forward to playing this match, and I almost didn't record it simply because, well, it just didn't seem like I was going to be able to do much. Now, what am I talking about record this match? Now, normally what I'll do is I'll record the match with the replay file. But lately I've actually been recording, or pressing record as soon as the carrier match that I'm playing starts. That way you can see all of these, clicks and whatnot. I had the Kaga and the Saipan review where I basically had to narrate exactly what I was doing, and you kind of had to imagine what was going on. I didn't really want that to be the case with the Enterprise since I learned that that's what happens. So I've been recording them live now for carriers, and because of the matchmaking, I almost didn't do that. But I think that those of you who like carriers will probably like this replay, and I was very glad when it ended that I did press record, because it's ended up being one of the better games that I've had in this ship. Certainly one of the most interesting, but I'll try not to spoil it anymore. Now we're bringing our torpedo bombers over sea. The first part of that is I want to spot it because there's a couple DDs. I want to make sure that the destroyers have a very tough time of getting C on the enemy team. And we do have a Kiev here. Now the Kiev is smoking up, and I very much consider going after him with a manual drop to flush him out of the smoke. But realistically, I see a Bismarck on the enemy team coming in, and I really want to go ahead and try and get some guaranteed damage versus just flushing someone out of smoke. Now we do have an enemy Shapayev and a Prince Eugen here, so all of this anti-aircraft really is going to make this hard. The Enterprise has really bad torpedo drop patterns to start with, and when they're under the effects of defensive AA, like you see right here, the spread is incredibly bad. Now I do manage to get 43,000 damage off of that drop, but I got fairly lucky because the enemy ships were grouped pretty close together, and the weird sporadic sort of split that the torpedo bombers, or the torpedoes actually dropped at, ended up basically working out and hitting more than one ship. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about a little bit more are the planes on the Enterprise, and not just the AP bombers that you see me going for this Bismarck with, but the planes themselves, in general, have the disadvantage of being Tier 7 planes. It's similar to the Kaga, where the planes on the ship, as I try and line this up perfectly so I get the most damage, but these planes basically are like the Kaga, and there's a nice 46,000 damage drop. They're lower tiered than the ship itself, and that makes them weaker against your contemporary Tier 8 carriers, the Shokaku and the Lexington. Now, facing Strike Lexingtons is great because they don't have fighters, so it's like, alright, well, this is fun. If you get air superiority Lexingtons, it's not nearly as fun. I'm bringing the fighters over this Fletcher to hopefully spot him for my team. There also is a Kagero, I think, hanging out down here too somewhere, so I want to hopefully spot him as well with these fighters. But the planes being down-tiered really do suffer when you're against ships that are, air superiority build, or in matches like this where we do have Tier 10 ships. Even, this Fletcher is shooting down a decent amount of the fighters. I think he's only shot down 2 at this point, and there's that Kagero. But that's enough that, with the Kagero and the Fletcher there, I really don't want to have both fighter squadrons there, and I really don't have a need for them. So I am moving Squadron 3 out of the AA bubble, and moving Squadron 2, and he just shot down another one, to spot the Kagero and the Fletcher. Now, one of the things, going back to the torpedo bombers, that you might have seen me doing was I was basically trying to get them both right on top of each other. That way when I make a drop with both of them, and we're going to rotate squad 3 in here, and then 2 is probably going to get shot down. I can't imagine that it's going to survive much longer. But I'm basically bunching these bombers so when I go for a manual drop, they're right next to each other, and they basically stack with the torpedoes, and that does mitigate the uselessness of this horrible backwards Kaga torpedo drop pattern. Um, Pay attention to how these drop, even when they're not scattered. It's pretty bad, and I'm going to go for this Iowa here because he's backing up. He's not going to have as much of an easy time of dodging these, but you know, look how fast that squadron and now squad 5 are getting shot down. And you can kind of see how bad the drop pattern on these planes are, as we notice both of the squads get destroyed. Like I say, it's basically a backwards Kaga drop pattern, except one of the amazing things about the Kaga is that the speed at which the torpedoes travel in the water is very good. You don't have that in the Enterprise, so having the weird, very widespread and kind of staggered drop that it has really isn't that good, and it's only compounded by the fact that the torpedoes themselves are not very quick. I tried to strafe this returning torpedo bomber squadron, and I do get a couple of them, but I probably should have waited till he got a little bit further away and then gone ahead and tried to attack then. Would have probably ended up working a little bit better for me. But now I'm focusing on the dive bombers once again. Strangely, I haven't seen much of the enemy Enterprise. He really doesn't seem to be doing much, but you see he still is alive. I just haven't seen any of his fighters really going after mine, so I don't know what he's doing with them, but I don't really care if he's not going to bother me with them, right? Speaking of the fighters, you'll notice that I'm already out of torpedo bombers, and I'm not out of dive bombers, but look how many, if you can see in the very bottom of the screen, how many reserve fighters I have compared to the dive bombers remaining. The fighters on this ship, unfortunately, in my opinion, you get quite a few of them. And this makes it a little bit hard. Nice 10,000 chunk. This makes it a little bit hard near the end of the game to do any damage. And basically, you're kind of shoehorned into almost an air superiority role. But the problem is, you were never really meant for that because of the Tier 7 planes that you're stuck with. You just basically have this giant reserve of fighters. And it's kind of annoying because I'd much rather have some more bombers. We're going to try and go for the Prince Eugen down here since he's isolated. I want to try and drop on him. I'm not quite sure if he has Hydro or Defensive AA, but we'll go ahead and put the drop pattern right here and see what happens. And it does look like we did get the glitch right there. I don't know if you've ever played carriers and noticed this, but apparently I think it's a glitch. If you set like the manual drop before they activate defensive fire or something like that, it will actually drop with a straight drop. So while it looked like it wasn't going to, we actually got to see kind of what the drop looks like since they actually dropped fairly straight. And it's a very large area that it drops in. Or I should say the torpedoes are a very widespread. I really can't highlight that enough. They're just so easy to dodge, especially if you only have one squadron. And we're almost down to one squadron too, so once again, having all these fighters, in my opinion, is more of a hindrance to your damage dealing ability. We're going to try and spot these destroyers for the smoked up Benson. Hopefully he can finish the Fletcher, and he does. But having so many fighters that really aren't that great to begin with, in my opinion, is kind of wasted on the Enterprise. I would love to have a few more dive bombers, a few more torpedo bombers, and not quite as many fighters. Dive bombers again are on the way towards a very large anti-aircraft bubble nearing sea, and it looks like we've got a fairly good, we should have a win in the bag. It looks like it. Now I did try and strafe the two torpedo bombers that were left, and I did destroy them, Unfortunately, they managed to drop on the Iowa, so he probably had to burn his damage control party. Speaking of Iowas, we're going to go for the enemy Iowa, and this again is a very hard thing to do because of the Tier 7 planes against Tier 9 Iowa anti-aircraft firepower. It's just very, very difficult to do damage. And then you notice I didn't even do that much with that strike. We're going to do, well, we're going to drop with Squadron 7, and we did even less damage there. It really seems like the armor-piercing dive bombers, which is kind of the quirk currently of the Enterprise, they're very, very sporadic. When they work really well, but when they don't work, you're kind of left scratching your head like, really? Moving back to the planes, I did forget to mention this, I believe. The Enterprise does get a module allowing, normally this is only for Tier 9 and 10 aircraft carriers, but you get a module that basically gives you, I think, 15% more hit points on your strike aircraft. Now I was trying to drop straight onto that Yamato to force him to try and turn out of it and kind of distract him from Squadron 4 here, but he basically shot it down before, and of course now it's not going to be an issue for him. And now he's shooting down Squadron 4. Come on, can we land all these torps at least? And now we're completely out of torpedo bombers. One thing I've also noticed about these torpedo bombers, if you drop them too close, and it's very tempting to do that because of how slow they are and how easy they are to dodge, you tend to kind of drop them a little closer than you should. And a lot of times you end up basically not doing anything with a couple of them because they don't arm in time. I'm trying to keep this Kagero spotted, but I don't want to get too close to the Shapayev as well as the Yamato over there. So hopefully my team can kill this Kagero before my fighters get shot down. Not that I don't have plenty of them around, but it's still fairly annoying in my opinion that they can't kill a destroyer that's on just a few hit points. But it looks like the enemy is turning this battle around, and realistically, there's not a lot of ships that are, well, there's me and there's two other they're battleships, and they're kind of a ways out there, so I'm not really expecting that Kagero to get killed anymore. Which is a bit unfortunate because with the Enterprise, you really don't do much against destroyers if you're using these armor-piercing dive bombers. You just over-penetrate them all the time. You see me manual dropping not manual dropping. Well, you do see me manual dropping with the torpedo bombers, but the dive bombers are another story. Similar to the Saipan, it's pretty much a better idea to just auto-drop them. The reasoning is they're only, I think, 10% less accurate. I'm getting under attack by that Prince Eugen that I didn't quite kill earlier in the match. But basically, because they are so accurate, they're only like 10% less accurate when you're just auto-dropping them. It makes more sense, in my opinion, to just let them auto-drop, because essentially what happens is when you auto-drop with them, it automatically puts it directly over the center of the enemy ship, which basically guarantees that more of them are likely to hit. You know, you kind of leave the human error aspect out of it. We're going to go full steam ahead. I have no way to attack this Prince Eugen other than a full-on ramming assault. I'm trying to leave a little bit of markers here just in case the friendly team decides to go for that Kagero. Although I think I accidentally took the order back. But basically, now we only have one option here to help the team anymore. Again, I want to keep the Kagero spotted, but at this point the main objective is going to be trying to ram the Prince Eugen. I'm on fire. I'm not putting this out. I know he has torpedoes. I expected them. I'll put it out now while they're about to hit to mitigate the damage, and I know I'm going to flood anyways. So now we're focusing on the last thing we can do for our team, and we really don't want to die here because that'll really suck, but that's right. Ramming speed. I felt really happy when I ended the game on this. You can look in the chat and see me typing, "Woo, let's go." Um, I felt very happy to get this for the ending. I know we lost, but having a ramming kill that got me the high caliber in a tier 10 game really made my day. But we did lose, so let's go on to the scorecard. So I would say for being a tier 8 carrier with tier 7 planes in a tier 10 game, 194,000 damage is a pretty good result, especially on a defeat. I was pretty heartbroken that the team couldn't pull it together in the end, but the enemy team did play fairly well, so we do have to give them that consolation there, or that commendation, I should say. Anyways, we landed 13 torpedo hits and only 22 dive bomb hits. This kind of goes to show you how, I think, in my opinion, the torpedoes, it really sucks trying to hit with them, but for me at least, sometimes it's easier to get hits with them than it is with the dive bombers, simply because they don't have to linger in the AA bubble as much. We didn't get quite as many torpedo hits, but again, that is partially due to the weird drop pattern that they have. We shot down 18 planes. That's not really that great, especially when I was against an Enterprise and there were 96 planes that he had. But again, I didn't really focus on shooting down his planes as much. He didn't really give me fighters to shoot down. And basically, I was trying to use my fighters, honestly, more to spot than to shoot down enemy planes, with varying success. I think if I had shot down a few more planes, we might have been able to actually pull the win. Anyways, we did sink 2 ships, and we'll move on to the next screen. We did manage to top the team's leaderboard with 1,278 damage, devastating strike for killing that Bismarck with the AP bombs, and the high caliber, which felt very good, again considering we were tier 8 carrier, tier 7 planes, tier 10 match. Though admittedly, if you look over here, there are only a couple tier 10s. Pretty much every ship in the game that wasn't a destroyer had decent anti-aircraft power. And I actually think I was against looks like a Lexington. I thought we were against an Enterprise, but it does look like I was against a Lexington. Yes, it has to be, because that is a different shape on the silhouette. I could have swore I was against an Enterprise, but apparently Lexington. Well, now we know. Moving on, most of the damage done was surprisingly by the torpedo bombers that I talked about how much I hate them. We got 94,000 with them and only 74,000 damage done with the armor-piercing bombs. And that, I think, kind of goes to highlight how sporadic the AP bombs can be. You obviously have no chance to start fires with them, and basically it's kind of like a battleship salvo that is more, like, somehow more RNG dependent. Obviously, you have the whole thing of you can only get a few strikes in during a match due to, having to fly in, drop them, fly back, rearm, and then send it again. But also due to the fact that they really do rely quite a bit on RNG to actually get those huge damage rolls that we saw against the enemy Bismarck. Back to the damage from the other stuff. Floodings, we only did 3,000 damage, and of course the ram at the end got us another 21,000 damage. So not bad for a tier 8 carrier again. We did lose 79 of our aircraft though, and I should highlight that because you might have 96 of them in the hangar, or well, I should say in total, but you still can lose them fairly easily. Again, they're tier 7, not tier 8. Finally, the credits and experience. We had a ton of modifiers here with the Wyvern flag and the Zulu flag, giving us about 70% more silver for a total of 800,000 silver. We did lose, so no, ×2 victory, whatever, but we obviously have 50% from the camo here, giving us 2,876 ship experience and 1,263 free experience. Now let's move to the build. So here we are in port, and I have to say this is probably one of my favorite US Navy camo schemes currently in the game. I really love just how the lines of this camo accentuate the curves of the ship, especially like right here. I don't know what it is, but right here These lines really does it for me. Don't know. Anyways, on to the consumables, which I like to start with. Premium Damage Control Party 2, pretty much self-explanatory. At Tier 8, you probably should have this on any ship anyways, but it's very... you're not going to lose a lot of money getting it on a Tier 8 carrier because it's, well, Tier 8 Premium carrier, so yeah. No reason to not have this. You probably could get away with using defensive AA Fire 1. I don't really see a lot of people going for carrier snipes anymore, especially because this is a thing. So you probably could use the defensive AA Fire if you didn't want to use the premium version. You'd probably get away with it just fine. Anyways, before we get on to the modules here, you do have the choice to use high explosive dive bombers. They are the top selection, and they will be selected by default. So if you want to use the armor piercing bombs, go ahead and select this bottom choice here. They are these 1,000-pound bombs Mark 33. That's your armor piercing bombs. And the weird thing is it notes that you have essentially what happens is, since this dive bomber has a more elongated sort of drop pattern, when you have the AP bombs, it has the weird sort of dimensions there for that. And yeah, these will probably look, I haven't actually used them, but they're more likely to look like a standard dive bomb drop. And they only have 500-pound tier 7 high explosive bombs, so they're not as effective as the Lexington's HE bombs would be. So go ahead and probably want to mount the AP dive bombers. And anyways, I think a lot of people want to use that in any case because of how unique they are currently, since this is the only ship that currently has AP dive bombers. Moving on to the little upgrades down here. First row, you want Air Groups Mod 1. Give your planes a little bit more effectiveness to their AA guns, or to their guns rather. In the second slot, Air Groups Mod 2. This will give your fighters a little bit more hit points and a lot more ammunition. And if there's one thing about the Enterprise, is that if you want to make the fighters work, you really have to be good at strafing. Because an air support Lexington is going to be able to wipe the floor with you if you don't know what you're doing. So yeah, having the extra ammunition for strafing is very, very handy. Air Groups Mod 3 is what you'll want in the third row, and this is very important because this is actually a module that normally you only get at Tier 9 and at Tier 10. But the Enterprise lucks out and they decided to give it to this ship since the planes are so much weaker. And basically what it does, it gives you an extra 15% hit points to your attack aircraft, so your dive bombers and your torpedo bombers. And basically the boost that it gives you, someone did the math on Reddit, and I can't remember what the numbers like straight up came out to, but it pretty much put the hit point levels on par with Tier 8 bombers, so it does go a long ways to helping them feel normal. It doesn't make them any faster, but at least the hit points are more or less the same. In slot number 4, you want Damage Control System Mod 1, pretty self-explanatory because the other two modifications are trash. Slot number 5, Damage Control System Mod 2. In my opinion, if you're going to be torpedo beating, you're probably not going to be able to dodge them all anyways, so you might as well have the extra flooding recovery time and the extra fire recovery time. Finally, you're an aircraft carrier, so if there was anything, if there's any ship class that Target Acquisition System Mod 1 is pointless on, it's certainly carriers, because they have, I do not want to do that, they have planes to spot things. So yeah, go ahead and get your Concealment System Mod 1. This will help you out a lot to getting your detectability down to a nice 10.7, which is fairly decent, I think, for a carrier. Going on to the captain. Now this is my midway captain, and I will have a midway review up probably within a couple weeks. I don't know if I want to do it next week or space it out with a Montana review. I kind of hate to do back-to-back carrier reviews for the people who don't like watching carriers, but we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Anyways, you'll want to start off with Aircraft Servicing Expert. This will give you 5% more hit points to your planes, as well as a nice 10% bonus towards servicing the planes. So pretty much any carrier is going to want this. If you're keeping this captain on the Enterprise, go ahead and get Dogfighting Expert, because since you do have Tier 7 planes, this will pretty much always be useful because it's going to give you a little bit more damage done when you are fighting up-tiered planes. In row number 2, you'll want Torpedo Acceleration. This is going to help with the really crappy torpedo drop pattern. Having that extra 5 knots is very important in my opinion because it does make it a little bit harder to dodge, and realistically carriers aren't concerned with torpedo dropping range, so the minus 20% really doesn't bother you that much at all. After that, you'll probably want to go with Torpedo Armament Expertise. You are a balanced loadout, so having the reload on these torpedo bombers is much nicer than having anything else. And really, carriers want this anyways. In the 4th row, you'll want Concealment Expert. Actually, scratch that. You will want Air Supremacy, giving you 1 fighter and 1 dive bomber more per squadron. And then I would probably go for Concealment Expert. That way, you see it gives a 16% bonus to your detectability. That way you can get it down to that nice 10.7 kilometer detection range. Finally, after that, you'll want Adrenaline Rush. And I think if I weren't building this captain to kind of help out on the Enterprise and the Midway, if it was straight up going to go on a Midway, and this might be your plan if you're playing the Enterprise, and planning to use it for a captain trainer, but you might forego getting Dogfighting Expert and then get something like potentially, maybe Basics of Survivability. That would be a pretty decent perk. If you are going to keep this, maybe you'll get High Alert instead. You also, of course, could get Emergency Takeoff, but to me, again, if you're on fire, you're probably in more trouble than this is worth using, which is why I have Torpedo Armament Expertise. So, in my opinion, would the Enterprise be a good ship? I know that's kind of a question that a lot of people are asking themselves, and I have to say, it's a very tough ship to use. The game that I showed you is not typical at all for me with the Enterprise. I'm not the best with carriers, and I won't pretend to be. I would say that I got fairly lucky with this game and how it ended up being fairly good. If you're new to carriers, I straight up say don't get this. If you're getting into carriers and you really want to go up the US line, this isn't a bad ship. I mean, it's certainly, it's a tier 8 carrier, so you have your ups and downs. You are going to be up-tiered sometimes, and I've had a lot more up-tiered games than top-tier games in the Enterprise, and I've probably played about a dozen games in it so far. So that's something to consider. If you're looking for a challenge, this is definitely the ship to get. And of course, if you like aircraft carriers and you're looking for a challenge, having lower tier planes, having the weird torpedo drop patterns, and sporadic dive bombers really does make the Enterprise challenging to say the least. Overall, though, I do enjoy the ship. It seems to me like once I get more used to it, I will be much more proficient at it. And again, I'm not the best with carriers either. I probably have still under 500 games. I have the Midway and the Hakuryu, but realistically, I had a ton of the prison camos, the Ocean Soul camos, which give you a fairly big bonus. You can see I'm almost out of them now. But that really helped the grind out, so I don't want to pretend, to be a carrier expert. But I think when I get a little bit more used to carriers, and if you're not used to carriers, but you want to try them, when you get more used to them, you will probably do much better. Anyways, I'm going to talk myself in a circle if I keep going, and this has probably become a fairly long video, so I'm going to call it quits. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, even if you're not that into aircraft carriers. I hope you liked seeing how the Enterprise did work out. Again, a weird ship, fun, but definitely weird. This is a steaming pile of ships signing off. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you had a wonderful day.